All right. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We are going to get today. We know a lot of you are staying, and we really appreciate the engagement today. I apologize for the microphone cutting out a little bit. We're going to do what we can, but we're going to get started. Try to get through our presentations today. So thank you all for being patient while we get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, it is November 22nd, 2024, and the time is 26 p.m. We are at the Willcox Community Center at 312 West Stewart Street, Willcox, Arizona, 85643. This is the time and place for the public hearing on the director's order initiating proceedings to consider designating the Willcox Ground Basin as an active management area. My name is Casey Allman. I am the Active Management Area Establishment Supervisor at the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and I will be the hearing officer for today's hearing. With me today from the department is Natalie Mast, AMA Director, who will provide an overview. Apologies. With me today is Natalie Mast, AMA Director, who will provide an overview of the AMA designation process, background, and regulatory features, and Ryan Mitchell, Chief Hydrologist. Ryan will provide an overview of hydrology in the Willcox Groundwater Basin. Also with me today, the department are Lucas Bennett, Deputy Counsel, Shauna Evans, Public Information Officer, Madison Moreno, AMA Establishment Coordinator, Jose Rivera, Technical Support, and Sharon Scantleberry, Docket Supervisor. The department's director, Tom Bushatsky, is not in attendance today. It is a long-standing policy of ADWR directors to not attend public meetings regarding matters under their consideration, so as to not create an impression of weighing the verbal comments more heavily than written comments. It is critical for the director to maintain objectivity and provide equal opportunity for comments, so in matters under the director's consideration, the department has typically made other staff available to provide information and to accept comments, as you see here today. I will also take time to acknowledge the elected officials who are present at this hearing. State Representative Gail Griffin, State Representative Lupe Diaz, State Representative Stephanie Stahl-Hamilton, State Representative Stacy Travers, and County Supervisor Peggy Judd. If I've missed anybody, please feel free to stand and introduce yourself. Today's public hearing will be transcribed by a court reporter. What'd you say? Today's hearing will be transcribed by a court reporter. Test. Today's public hearing will be transcribed by a court reporter, so it is important for speakers, please speak up and speak slowly so that the court reporter can accurately record your comments. If anyone has difficulty hearing me or a speaker, please let me know. The transcript made of The transcript will be made available to ADWR's director, All right. Today's public hearing will be transcribed by a court reporter. It is important for speakers to please speak up and speak slowly so that the court reporter can accurately record your comments. Okay. If anyone has difficulty hearing me or speaker, please let me know. The transcript will be made available to ADWR's director and will be posted online as soon as available. Comments already submitted to the docket supervisor are available on the department's website and will be part of the director's consideration. The website director's address or the website address is azwater.gov/find-info-on/have-I/Willcox groundwater basin. At this hearing, ADWR will provide presentations on this public hearing process, an overview of the AMA designation process, background and regulatory features, as well as an overview of the hydrologic information about the basin. For those in person, if you haven't done so, please sign the sign-in sheet on the table near the entrance. There are also speaker cards on the table. If you would like to speak today, please fill out a speaker card if you haven't already done so, and submit your card to Sharon Scantleberry or any other staff present from ADWR. Those on the webinar, we have provided a link to a virtual speaker card in the chat box and on the screen. The chat box can be opened. Chat box can be opened by clicking the speech bubble icon at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to speak via webinar today, submit your virtual speaker card and staff will call on you when it is your turn to speak. Everyone was muted on entry to the webinar. You will be unmuted when it is your turn to speak. For those participating via telephone and not the webinar, and you would like to make a verbal comment, please. Apologies. Please state and spell your name and we will call on you when it is your turn to speak. If you would not like to make a comment, please simply stay silent. We will call telephone participants to speak after the webinar participants. Persons presenting at the hearing, whether in person or virtually, will be subject to a 3-minute time limit to allow for as many speakers as possible during today's hearing. The hearing will be conducted in a formal manner. As I mentioned previously, the contents of this hearing will be transcribed by a court reporter. A copy of the transcript of the hearing will be available for review at the department's office and will also be posted on the department's website when it is available. At the conclusion of this hearing, I will be accepting any written comments or documentary evidence that anyone may wish to submit to the department regarding the process. The department will also accept written comments, fax, or email prior to midnight today. Written comments submitted up till midnight today should be submitted to the department's docket supervisor, Sharon Scantleberry, by email at docketsupervisor@water.gov or by fax at 602-771-8686. A copy of the public notice with Sharon's contact information is posted on the department's website, and her business cards are located at the table near the entrance if you would like one. On September 26, 2024, ADWR hosted a public meeting and informal session on the status of the Willcox groundwater basin, which included presentations regarding hydrologic conditions and management options. Public and comments from that meeting or otherwise submitted to the department were incorporated in an FAQ section on the Willcox groundwater basin page on ADWR's website. Next slide, please. Hydrologic information and the public comments received, the director signed an order on October 23rd, 2024 to initiate procedures to consider designating the Willcox groundwater basin as an AMA. In the same, the director also ordered a public hearing. Today's public hearing is to receive evidence, both orally and written, as to the following criteria. 1. Active management practices are necessary to preserve the existing supply of groundwater for future needs. 2. Land subsidence or fissuring is endangering property or potential groundwater storage capacity. And 3, the use of groundwater is resulting in actual or threatened water quality degradation. The department will also present the factual data in its possession in support of the proposed subsequent active management area pursuant to ARS statute 45-413C. Next slide, please. We see here the map of the Willcox groundwater basin that was included in the public notice. This map defines the boundaries of the groundwater basin that is subject to the proposed AMA. I will hand the mic over to Natalie Mast, AMA Director, her presentation of overview of AMA designation process, background, and regulatory features.
Thank you, Casey. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Mast. I am the Active Management Director at ADWR. I will provide a presentation that explains the AMA process and review what an AMA is and what it requires. Okay. And some procedures related to the establishment of a subsequent AMA. Next slide, please. The legal structures for an active management area were established under the 19 Groundwater Management Act, which created AWR in groundwater regulation. Ground in the expansion areas. That's fine.
Just let you know, we're getting a lot of people commenting that they want us to just, I doubt this is going to work, that they want us to just shout to the group. We understand that sentiment, but the problem is that the folks that are listening online, they can only hear audio if it goes through the microphone. That's why we're sticking with the microphone. We're obviously having a little bit of technical difficulties. I know that it's cutting in and out. We can hear that up here as well. We're trying our best to tinker with it while we go, but that's the reason that we're sticking with the microphone. That's understood.
All right. Okay. All right, we're going to continue. Thank you all for your patience. We understand that the technical issues are frustrating. It's here. The legal structures for active management areas were established under the 1980 Groundwater Management Act, which created ADWR, imposed groundwater regulations in the initial irrigation non-expansion areas and active management areas, or AMAs, and authorized the establishment of new AMAs and INAs by either local initiation or by designation of the ADWR director. Sir, we have time for public comment at the end of the presentations. We'd like to continue at this point. Thank you. Existing? Sir? Sir, if you're not going to behave respectfully, we're going to ask you to leave. Thank you. The initial AMAs created by the Groundwater Management Act were Prescott, Phoenix, Pinal, and Tucson. The Santa Cruz AMA was split out from the Tucson AMA in 1995 and is by statute still considered an initial AMA because it did nothing to change, or excuse me, because it did not change the geographic footprint of those initial AMAs. The establishment of the Douglas AMA in December of 2022 was the first ever subsequent AMA. Slide. Thank you. The Groundwater Management Act created a tiered regulatory structure. This slide is not comprehensive, but can start to give an idea of the additive nature of this structure. A few provisions, such as the registration of all wells, apply statewide. In irrigation non-expansion areas, or INAs, additional provisions apply, like, as the name provides, a prohibition on newly irrigated acres. In active management areas, or AMAs, still more provisions apply. The requirement to obtain a grandfathered right or withdrawal permit for most uses of groundwater, assured water supply, mandatory conservation programs designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater, and well spacing provisions. This slide shows some of the water management tools that provide protection in an AMA. Mandatory measuring and reporting non-exempt wells functions to provide good data which supports water management decision-making in an AMA. Impact analysis is required for new non-exempt wells in an AMA and functions to limit negative impacts of new wells on nearby existing wells. Mandatory conservation programs are designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater in the AMA and can be made incrementally more stringent over successive management plans to help the AMA move toward its management goal. Assured water supply requirements require that new developments can demonstrate a 100-year water supply before they can be built, providing protection for prospective homebuyers. As I mentioned before, a new AMA can be created by a process initiated by the ADWR director. That process is summarized on the screen. When that process is initiated, an order is published by the ADWR director and a hearing is scheduled. This triggers a prohibition on the expansion of irrigated acreage for the area in question. I'll talk more about that on the next slide. And for this consideration of whether to establish an AMA in the Willcox groundwater basin, the legal process was initiated on October 23rd. And that triggered this irrigation non-expansion provision. No sooner than 30 days, later than 60 days after the hearing is announced, a public hearing is required to be held in the basin in question, at which ADWR presents factual data in support of the AMA, thank you, and takes public comment. Is what we are here for today. Within 30 days, ADWR is required to issue written findings with respect to matters considered during the hearing and would typically issue a decision at the same time as the findings. If the director decides to create an AMA, the prohibition on the expansion of irrigated acres would remain in effect permanently. If the director decides not to create an AMA, that prohibition would be lifted at that time. Slide. The definition of irrigation in this context is important. In the context of these proceedings and in the context of an AMA, to irrigate has a very specific definition, which is to apply water to 2 or more acres of land to produce plants or parts of plants for sale or human consumption, or for use as feed for livestock, range livestock, or poultry. As I mentioned on the previous slide, this process established a prohibition on the expansion of irrigated acres under that definition. This is a prohibition of the irrigation of any acres not legally irrigated at any time during the 5 years preceding October 23rd, 2024. To say that another way, only acres of land that were legally irrigated at any time between October 23, 2019 and October 23, 2024 may be irrigated pending a decision by the director on these proceedings. ADWR does have statutory enforcement authority regarding these provisions, and lands found to be in violation of this prohibition may be fined up to $10,000 per day. Land development, investment, or irrigation after October 23rd, 2024 is not eligible to be considered for substantial capital investment. And ADWR's compliance team is actively monitoring irrigated acreage in the basin and will continue to investigate any potential violations. In considering whether to designate the Willcox groundwater basin as an AMA, the director will consider the following statutory criteria, as well as public comment and any recommendations made by local political subdivisions. If any of these criteria exist in the basin, the director may designate the area as a subsequent AMA. Number 1, active management practices are necessary to preserve the existing supply of groundwater for future needs. Number 2, land subsidence or fishing is endangering property or potential groundwater storage capacity. Number 3, use of groundwater is resulting in actual or threatened water quality degradation. This slide shows a timeline summary of the establishment process if a new AMA is created. As mentioned before, on the expansion of irrigated acres would be permanent. Additionally, all withdrawals from non-exempt wells would be required to be measured. And I'm on a future slide, I'm going to define what specifically a non-exempt well is. All withdrawal from non-exempt wells would be required to be measured using an approved measuring device or method. These measurements and other water use information must be submitted to the department annually by March 31st. These provisions would become effective immediately if an AMA is established. Within 30 days of the creation of an AMA, ADWR is required to propose a management goal for the AMA. Within 15 months of the creation of an AMA, anyone claiming the right to withdraw or receive and use groundwater pursuant to a grandfathered right would be required to submit an application for a certificate of grandfathered right. Anyone who did not submit an application by the deadline would be deemed to have waived and relinquished any right to use groundwater pursuant to a grandfathered right. Within 2 years of the creation of an AMA, ADWR would adopt a management plan containing mandatory conservation requirements designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. The requirements in that plan would become effective at least 2 years after that adoption. This slide is not comprehensive. If an AMA is created, ADWR would work through these and other establishment processes to develop and implement the regulatory framework necessary to administer the AMA. This does take time. And ADWR would work to engage local stakeholders in these and communicate these timelines. Finally, this slide is intended as a clarification. There are a lot of details to the regulatory requirements associated with an AMA, rights, measuring and reporting, conservation requirements, etc. And it's important to note that those requirements apply to using groundwater from a non-exempt well. Those using groundwater exempt well are exempt from these requirements. An exempt well has to check 3 boxes. has a pump capacity of 35 gallons per minute, uses less than 10 acre feet for non-irrigation purposes, and is not being used to irrigate 2 or more acres of land. If it cannot check all 3 of those boxes, then it's a non-exempt well, and that water use is subject to AMA regulatory requirements. But if it meets those 3 criteria, then it's considered an exempt well, and it is exempt from needing to obtain a right or withdrawal authority, exempt from the requirement to measure and report water use, and is exempt from any conservation requirements in the management plan. Those wells do still need to be registered through ADWR's wells section and would need to document any deepening or any other modifications, as well as any ownership changes. This specific requirement applies to all wells statewide, but those wells would be exempt from AMA specific requirements. With that, I'd like to thank you for your patience and your attention so far, and I will hand the presentation off to Ryan Mitchell to discuss hydrology in the Willcox water basin.
So I think Natalie might have found a sweet spot where maybe it'll work. So I'll stay over here, stay close. I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I do appreciate the engagement. I think this is an amazing show of interest from the locals, and I think it's fantastic that you're all here. Thank you for allowing us to come and talk to you and speak to you. Appreciate that as well. As Natalie said, my name is Ryan Mitchell. I'm the chief hydrologist, so I run the technical science branch of the department. So the folks that work for me are the field geologists and hydrologists and engineers, the guys that go out, collect data, that analyze, that prepare groundwater flow models, that kind of do the technical nerdy science stuff that the department uses for decision making. See if this works. Hey, it's working. All right. So in September, this last month, we were here and I gave a presentation that covered a whole lot of hydrology information. It was pretty long, was really involved, but I do think it was really informative. We're not going to go through all of that stuff today. Just hit some of the highlights from that September 26th presentation. But this slide here has a link in yellow that will take you to a website where not only the presentation from the 26th is posted, slides are also posted, and we re-recorded that we had audio problems. Slide your computer back. We re-recorded the presentation and posted it where it was just straight to a microphone so everyone can hear everything really clear. That went through the entire presentation again. So the information is there. We also wrote a technical memorandum and posted it to the website that summarizes everything that was presented hydrologically there as well. So if you do want more detail or more information about what land subsidence is and how it occurs, the detail can be there. And today we're just gonna hop through some of the highlights. So as a regional overview, the Willcox Basin is in the Basin and Range Physiographic Province. That means it's a downdrop graben basin filled with basin fill alluvium. So there's sands, gravels, clays, just fine-grained, unconsolidated stuff that falls into the central basin. And over time, that central basin will fill with water from precipitation, snowmelt, rainfall, and that comprises the alluvial aquifer of the Willcox Basin. There's a large evaporative playa feature in the center of the basin. Because the basin is internally draining, that means all of the surface water and streams and rain collect in the middle of the basin and then evaporates out. You guys are all probably very familiar, but it is a unique feature that you find here in Willcox. The elevation can range from about 4,000 feet at the basin floor at the lowest point up to over 10,000 feet near Mount Graham. Thank you. The groundwater is considered alluvial, meaning it does occur in those loose, unconsolidated sediments. Because the alluvial basin is a mixture of gravels and clay and other materials. Sorry, trying to yell too. Because it's a mixture of all these multiple material types, you'll have different like confining zones. So you'll have unconfined and confined aquifer conditions within this basin. Precipitation ranges down at the basin floor about a foot per year, 10 to 12 inches. And as you go up in elevation, you get more precipitation. There's about 14 to 18 inches of rainfall that you guys receive up on the slopes. So we have a lot of data in the basin itself. Just a quick summary of what data we have available to us now. There are 52 active index wells in the Willcox Basin, 4 of which are measured automatically with transducers. We actually recently installed 2 more, so thank you for that. We have 48 of those index wells that we measure annually. So some are recording continuously, and that gets delivered to our database every day. Some we send out the field hydrologist guys, and they collect the measurements manually about once a year. In addition to the regular annual water level collection, we'll occasionally do what's called a basin sweep. And that's when we come out with a huge group, as many guys as we can, and we collect as many water levels all through the basin in as short of a time period as possible. And when we do that, we get a nice snapshot of the water table of what the aquifer looks like, during that week or so, how long it takes us to conduct one. We've conducted basin sweeps 6 different times, so 1990, 94, 99, 05, 14, 15, and 2021. In just those basin sweeps alone, we had 4,600 water level measurements that we collected. In addition to water level information, we will also collect discharge rate data. We're not necessarily interested in what the pump can yield. What we want to know is what the aquifer can yield, because we can back calculate that into a hydraulic conductivity value, and it tells us information about the aquifer itself. We do collect and monitor land subsidence across the state, and in particular in the Willcox Basin. And the AZGS will actually map earth fissures throughout the state, and there's significant fissure activity here in Willcox as well. I think currently there are no active USGS stream gauges. Those are the ones that record water as it's flowing down a creek or an arroyo, or if there is a ephemeral water stream or shed. So we had some in the past that we would collect data from. We haven't had an active stream gauge in the basin for a few years now. We are working with the USGS to install a few more across the state, and we'd like to get some here. In addition to the empirical data, so the measurements that I showed on that previous slide, we also can model the basin as well. In 2018, we released a model. If anyone's interested in reading more, the link here will take you to the modeling report. This was a model of the basin where we essentially said we know the water level information going back to the 40s. We've got 75 years or so of pumping history and of water level data. Can we make a simulation that simulates the aquifer so that we can start using that for planning purposes? And so we have a really good fit with this model where we were able to simulate all of the water level conditions across that long 75-year period of record. And we found that when we created the model, prepared it, and then when we ran it, it matched our water level information that we had over the decades. And it showed about 400 feet of drawdown in the Kansas settlement area, which is consistent with the water level recordings that we've collected over the decades. And then the model, we use it as a tool. So it is a tool, and it can always be refined and improved on. But we use it as a tool to say, we may not know exactly the discharge rates that everyone's pumping, but we know that the water table was here, and then it was here, and then it was here over time. And we're able to then calculate, well, how much water in total was withdrawn over that period of time. So we know it on a basin-wide scale. And on a basin-wide scale, the model is estimating just under 6 million acre feet, 5.7 million acre feet of groundwater has been withdrawn from the aquifer. And to put that into perspective, if all the wells in the basin were turned off today and the basin was left to its own devices, its own natural recharge rate, it would take about 280 years for that amount of water to recover to get back to the pre-development 1940 water level. So this is an example of the type of way that we synthesize the information or the data and we start modeling it. The next few slides, we're going to look at individual wells and what their drawdown looks like over time. So on the left, you'll see a map of the basin itself. The red boundary is the basin boundary. All the blue dots you see are wells, the location of wells. The red blob kind of in the middle, those are the mapped subsidence features. So there's actually two features. It's kind of hard to see that there's a separation between the two, but there's a northern feature and a southern feature. And what we're going to do, if you can see a little yellow dot with the arrow going to it, this is the well that we're going to look at a hydrograph of. Now, a hydrograph is, as it sounds, it's just a graph of the water that's in the well. On the left side, you have the depth to water. So the number is going down is increasing as you go down because it's getting deeper. On the right-hand side, you have what we call water level elevation. So that's the water level above mean sea level. They both tell you the exact same thing. It's just one is a number that's increasing as you go down, but the other one is decreasing as you go down because that's elevation above sea level and you're getting lower. Point being, we have information for a well going back to, in this case, 1969 for this particular well. We're going to start up in the north and work our way down through the basin and look at a few different wells. In 1969, we had a measurement of 335 feet below land surface. In 2023, last November, we had a measurement of 458 feet below land surface. So on the bottom, on the x-axis, that's actually the date. So just time is going by, but this is several decades. And we have a decline of about 123 feet in a 55-year period. So let's move down south a little bit further. Now we're in one of the subsidence features now. The first measurement we have here all these plots will have the same map on the left. And I also want to point out, there's a link on the bottom in blue below the map. If you were to click that link, well, it's on our website as well, but if you were to click that link, it'll take you to an interactive map, kind of like Google Maps or Google Earth. And you can scroll around, look around, and you can click on any of our wells and see all of the water level data that we have for them. So it's a publicly available, easy to navigate map. I encourage everyone to take a look in your area and just kind of see what is the water level doing, where you live, or if you have any other areas of interest. But this particular well, 1965, 170 feet below land surface. 2023, we're at 379 feet below land surface. So that's over 200 feet of decline in 58 years. Here we have a well where in 1954, so we've got a longer period of record here, 83 feet below land surface. And then in 2023 is 199 feet. And I'll point out, a lot of these wells will have a similar trend. It kind of looks like an S shape. There's a lot of decline in the 50s and 60s. It kind of comes back up during the 90s and it'll drop back down again. And that actually represents all this wet hydrology that we had during the 90s. This is a very wet decade across the whole state. Lots of rainfall, lots of snow. The aquifer was actually gaining water as the natural recharge was so high. And then with this drop that you see at the end, that means the water budget is out of balance and that there's more withdrawals than there are recharge. And so that's when you see water levels declining over time across the whole basin. That kind of signifies to us, or as a signal to hydrologists, that the water budget is out of balance and that the outflows are exceeding the inflows. But we look at this well, it's 116 feet of decline in 69 years. Here we move south of the lake, of the playa, and we're now in the Kansas settlement area. First measurement here, 1954, is 41 feet. I want to point out that the scale on this particular plot is different than the previous ones. Instead of being 10 feet or so for each of those tick marks, we are now looking at hundreds of feet for each tick mark. So you can see the same drop, the kind of leveling out and then the drop again. But this is 368 feet of decline in a 68-year period. Here is another one in the same area where we show over 400 feet of decline in a 68-year period. If we move a bit further to the west, similar trend, the little bit of leveling and then back down again. But overall, this one we have 205 feet in 69 years. And this one is interesting because there's a really steep decline here in the beginning. So 1966 to 1981, this one showed 114 feet of decline in just 15 years. So when we were looking at the first couple hydrographs that were up in the northern area, there were 123 feet, 118 feet over a 50, 60-year period. This particular well saw the same amount of drawdown, but in just a decade and a half. And then you have that kind of that recovery period where some water was coming in and you see it level out, but then you see it kind of dropping off again. And if we look at just the last 13 years, just to see what the rate is, because it's actually increasing year over year. It's getting steeper. But this particular well had another 111 feet in just a 13-year period. So these are really rapid stabilizing and really rapid declines. Another way to look at the water level data over time. So those were all individual wells. So we say we're taking a single point and we're looking at what its water table is doing over time. Another way to do it is to look at the entire basin and map out remember I said we did those basin sweeps where we'd come out, where we'd hit as many wells as we could, and then we get an idea of what the surface looks like, of what the water table looks like. And then we say, let's fast forward. In this case, we did from 1990 to 2021. So let's fast forward 31 years and see what did the water table do? Did it go up? Did it go down? Did it stay the same? And this map that you're seeing here are contours of the water level change over that 30-year period. So where you see the concentric circles, the rings, those are contour intervals that are actually telling you that the water level has changed a lot in that spot. Those little bullseyes are local cones of depression. So we noticed that over the 30-year period, the water table, especially in the Kansas settlement area, had over 200 feet of drawdown across the whole area, not just on single points, but across the whole area, greater than 200 feet within that 30-year period. Another data point that we like to consider or look at when we're assessing an aquifer system, we want to know what the water budget is, how the aquifer is performing, is we look and see, well, do we have any wells that are dry? That's something that's more intuitive, a bit easier to understand. Is my well, it used to have water in it, now it doesn't. This map you see here show all of the index wells that our field hydrologists have gone out to measure, where they had collected measurements before in the past. So year after year, they come back out, they always get a water level. Then they come out one year and the well is now dry. They'll flag it in our database, they'll tag it in the system, they'll keep checking it to see if it ever comes back up. But these are wells that across the Willcox Basin that we use to monitor, and now they are dry. There's 71 of them in Willcox. And one question I posed to my staff was, well, what about just recently? What about in the last 10 years, just in the last decade? In the last 10 years, of the 71 wells, 29 of them had gone dry just in the last 10 years. So that tells me that the rate is accelerating. 29 of the wells, that's approximately 40% of them. So the first map is going back to the 40s. So there could have been a ton of wells back then that went dry years ago, but almost 30 that went dry just in the last 10 years. And as I said, these were wells that our staff would go out and try to measure and then find that they were dry. You can report your own wells that do go dry, and this QR code and the link will take you to the form that you would fill out. So if you have a well on your property or a well of your own that does go dry, I encourage you to report it, because we do include it in our database like this. So far in Willcox, we've only had one person report a dry well. That was about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was an unregistered well. So it wasn't even in our system. It was a well from pre-1940 cable tool well that no one knew was even there. But beyond that, no one's yet to report any additional dry wells to us. So it might have been hard to hear, but one of the criteria that Natalie spoke about for consideration of an AMA is land subsidence and earth fissuring. Land subsidence is a phenomenon that occurs when the saturated alluvium that's been full of water for millennia has been dewatered or gone dry, and the soil will start to compact. And it'll start to compact over this, we said 400 feet in some areas of the water level declining. That means 400 feet of just a little bit of compaction, but you've got a whole lot of it. And it represents itself at the surface as a lowering of the surface elevation. So the land is actually going down over time in areas where the aquifer is being depleted. And like I said, if you want the full explainer, the other videos, the other presentations that we gave give a lot of detail. So I'm going to jump right to the maps and just show you guys what the subsidence in Willcox looks like. This here is a map of the Willcox Basin just for the last 14 years. We have hundreds of these subsidence maps across the state on our website. So if you want to see different periods of time, if you want to see just in a 5-year period, going back 30 years, if you want to see different timescales, we have a whole map series. Encourage you guys to go check it out. But in the last 14 years alone, we have seen and measured between 47 and 55 inches of subsidence, of lowering of the land surface elevation. in the areas here where you see the color. I believe there's someone in the back that's playing a video that's disrupting some folks. So if you could please keep the audio, cell phone videos off, or at least quiet for now, would be much appreciated. Thank you guys. So as a reminder, land subsidence is a function of the alluvium compacting from being dewatered. So this is kind of telling you where the dewatering has occurred and then the collapse of the soil. So another thing that we look at besides just total land subsidence, we want to know what is the rate of subsidence? Because it's like a car driving down the highway, you're going a certain speed. Are you speeding up or are you slowing down? Is the rate of subsidence maintaining? Is it the same year after year? So this map here is a measurement of the subsidence that occurred in a 1-year period during 1996. And you can see anywhere that's white or not within the polygon, there was no measured subsidence. The really faint kind of yellows and browns you're seeing is about 0.4 to 1.2 inches in that 1-year period. So subsidence was occurring in the 90s, but it was occurring at a pretty slow rate. And this is this last year. So from a 12-month period in 2023 to 2024, we're seeing almost 3 inches of subsidence year over year. And that rate of subsidence is increasing. So to us, that is significant. That means that if everyone were to stop pumping today and disappear out of the basin, the land would continue to subside for a few decades before it stabilized. So this is a problem that we want to try to address now and not let exacerbate any further. Here's an iconic photo when the geophysicists go out there and they say, hey, here's what the elevation used to be and here's what it is now. This is Brian Conway. He is the manager of our geophysics surveying unit, a very brilliant geophysicist. He's holding up the sign that's showing 11.5 feet of subsidence from 1969 until today. And a few other signs or pieces of evidence that land subsidence is occurring are things that we call floating well pads. So this is a wellhead, and when this well was drilled and installed, they poured the cement pad at the surface as a footing and sometimes to put their pump on. And over time, this area, the water levels declined, the soil started to compact, and the whole area is dropping and lowering. And because the casing itself has some rigidity and some internal integrity, it will hold itself up some. So the land is dropping below, and now you've got this well pad floating up in the air. This particular well pad is about 30 or 31 inches off the ground right here. That doesn't mean that there has only been 30 inches of subsidence here, because chances are the casing is catching that depth, and when it does collapse at a deeper depth, it will crinkle the casing like a soda can. That's why this particular well doesn't have a pump on it anymore. I have a feeling they probably can't get down it any longer. But this is a visual sign that you can see, oh yeah, the land is actually subsiding. It is lowering, even though it's imperceptible because it's, a few inches year over year. It's kind of hard to notice. But here's a piece of evidence. Here's another one, Kansas settlement area. Here's another one where the pad was lifted up. It was so heavy that it kind of broke under its own weight. Here's a different one. And these photos are just to show, like we have the satellite imagery or measurements of the land subsidence occurring, but there's also boots on the ground physical evidence of it as well. In addition to subsidence, there's a phenomenon called earth fissuring, and that is when you have subsidence occurring and you have an underground ridge of some kind. And when the land wants to keep going down, but it's being held up on one side, you start to kind of pull apart the soil a little bit, and you'll get these hairline fractures. Those hairline fractures will then erode and fill with water over time, and eventually they'll open up as a big earth fissure, a big crack in the ground. In Willcox, the AZGS will map these earth fissures. They are related to subsidence, so we do monitor them ourselves as well. But the AZGS are the folks who come out and use their GPS and actually mark it on maps and upload all that information. Last summer, in the end of July 2023, they had 48.76 miles worth of earth fissures that have occurred in the Willcox Basin. We know that number has gone up since then. We have earth fissures that open up after almost every rainstorm, it seems like, out here. So this is a map that shows the two subsidence features, the purple one up north and the Kansas settlement feature down in kind of a teal color. It's kind of hard to see, but there are these little black lines that show up on the map. I'm going to switch to another view so you guys can see them better, but this is the distribution or kind of where those fissures are occurring. So here, if we look at this version on the left, we have the southern half of the basin, the southern subsidence feature. On the north, we have, or the right, we have the northern half. And I put it in red so that's a little bit easier, kind of stands out. But we have got about 50 miles worth of mapped fissures across this basin. So what do earth fissures look like? I'm sure a lot of you guys know you have the road signs that say caution, fissures, drive with caution. You know, I'm sure plenty of folks in this room have some on their property. But here's one, it's a big crack that opens up in the ground. This one is cutting through a fence and going towards a stock pond near Sulphur Hills. Here's one that opened up Ranch House in Fort Grant Roads in 2023. This is an AZGS geologist who's mapping it. And you can see this was a fresh one that just opened up. Here's one near Dragoon Road in 2019. You can kind of see into it some, that there's actually open void space underneath there. These things really are a geohazard. They're dangerous to property and to people and livestock. The only reason, if you see the two cracks that are continuing up, that little piece right there looks like it wants to fall down too, but there's vegetation there. And so the roots are likely holding that piece in place. So it could be opened underneath. This is a kind of condition where you have like cattle walk across and it would fall on them. Here's one near Dragoon Road that's actually cutting underneath the road. So the road's been undermined by this fissure. Here's one that's really wide. It's actually a good like 20 feet. It opened up really wide and far apart. This was one of our field guys that went out to collect a measurement at a well, and the road was gone. So he had to stop and hike it the rest of the way. But they do show up and pretty rapidly. Here's another fresh one. This is from, I say fresh because you can see how it's still a little damp. There's some red or a little darkness to the soil there. The roots are holding that piece up as well. I wouldn't walk across that if it were me. Here's another one cutting across a road. Here's another one that had just opened up that night before, and you can see that the roots from the plant on the right are actually still stretching across to the left. Here's another one from 2021 where the water is still draining, but the asphalt, that piece of road that was there, is actually gone. So, like I said, we gave a really lengthy explainer kind of presentation in September, and this was meant to be just a quick highlights of that. If you guys would like any additional information, I'd encourage you to watch that recording again, read the technical memo, check out the website, the information, the data. But as a quick summary, in the Willcox Basin, groundwater declines have been observed greater than 400 feet in our period of record. Land subsidence is definitely present and a real factor out here. The rate of subsidence has been increasing year after year. And there are significant earth fissures that we have seen and mapped across the basin. And I believe I'm handing it back to Casey. You may sit over here.
Thank you, Ryan. We will now move into the public comment portion of the hearing. We recognize that there may be strong opinions on the potential designation of an AMA, and we ask for your cooperation with our efforts to conduct this hearing in an orderly fashion. We will call the names of individuals who have filled out speaker cards, either in person or virtually, in the order that they are received. When the time comes, please make your way to the podium. Persons with limited mobility who would like to speak should remain in their seats, and we will bring the microphone to you when it is your turn to speak. For those attending virtually, if you have filled out the virtual speaker card at the link provided in the chat box, we will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. Those wishing to speak may be subject to a 3-minute time limit. We ask for your cooperation in respecting that time limitation. We will enforce this limitation, and we will move to the next speaker once the time limitation has expired. We ask that others refrain from talking while a speaker is speaking, and that the speaker direct his or her comments or questions towards me rather than to the members of the public. The department will also accept written comments via fax or email prior to midnight today. Written comments should be submitted prior to midnight today and should be submitted to the department's docket supervisor, Sharon Scantleberry, by email to docketsupervisor@azwater.gov or fax at 602-771-8686. Sharon's business card can also be picked up as you exit if you did not already pick it up. We will take a moment now to collect speaker cards which have not already been turned in. After that, I will begin calling on those who have filled out speaker cards. Is there anybody in the audience that has a speaker card they wish to turn in? Hello. For those participating via telephone and not on the webinar who would like to make a verbal comment, please state and spell your name now, and we will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you would not like to make a comment, please simply stay silent. We will call on telephone participants to speak after webinar participants. We will unmute telephone participants now. Please be advised that those presenting comments at the hearing, whether in person or virtually, will be subject to a 3-minute time limit to ensure all who wish to speak receive an opportunity to do so. I will now begin calling the names of the persons who filled out speaker cards, either in person or virtually. If you wish to speak and have not filled out a speaker card, please fill out one of the cards at the table near the entrance or by using the link in the chat box and submit it to Sharon Scantleberry. When I call your name, please come up to the podium, state and spell your name, identify any person or entity that you represent, and then give your comments. If you are participating via the webinar when I call your name, staff will help unmute you. Please state and spell your name, identify any person or entity that you represent, and then give your comments. As a reminder, there is a 3-minute time limit. The first name is Jim Applegate.
I'm Jim Applegate. I'm representing myself. I have 3 questions. One, what regulation, rule law gives the governor the right to declare a valid vote null and void? 2 years ago, we voted on this. Now, all of a sudden, she is reading out a description that says you will. Now, this is part of the problem that you're having here. It's by edict rather than by education. If people would come down, you put on a demonstration, I grant you there is a problem, but it isn't solvable by saying you will. It says we should. It ought to get together and do this. My first question. My second question was you showed a bunch of pictures of the Dragoon area, subsidence fish, subsidence dry wells, everything. And in those pictures is the power plant. How will the power plant be in this AMA thing? Now, they're probably, in what I was told, about the big user of water in this valley. They are where we ought to start. Rather than picking on me, which has the acres, but I do have a well that pumps more than 35 gallons a minute. So I'm going to be put under some sort of control and reporting. That's it.
Thank you. Kate. We do ask that you keep applause to a minimum just so folks online can clearly hear. Thank you for that. Next speaker is James Graham.
Thank you for taking the time to come and meet with us, and I appreciate your courage.
Would you
My
mind
name is
speaking a little
Jim
bit
Graham.
closer? Would you mind speaking a little bit closer to the mic? Sorry.
My name is Jim Graham, Graham, just Graham crackers. My wife and I farm. We have 400 acres near Dragoon in the Cochise area. We raise pistachios and wine grapes. We stand in opposition to the AMA. We don't think that the AMA solved the problem. We agree with almost everybody here that there's a problem. It just won't solve the problem. And it would create winners and losers. The winners would be those who have exploited the aquifer for a long period of time, outside investors that have a lot of money, and people like us that have a family farm for over 40 years. Small, we have to pay for things as we can pay for them. It's a long-term plan. We start with small acreage and expand it over a period of time. Our farm has been expanded 5 times over 40 years. We have a vineyard. We would like to be able to expand more at some point in time. The AMA would not allow that. So, and winners and losers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Next up, Lisa Glenn.
I would first like to thank ADUR for being here tonight. We are grateful that you have come to this point. My name is Lisa Glenn, and my husband and I have lived in Willcox for 57 years. I find this moment, actual chance that we will get an AMA to further sensible and appropriate regulation for the groundwater basin and rural groundwater. It's been a long time getting here. Decades, residents of the Willcox groundwater basin sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Okay, we have been asking for some regulation on groundwater pumping to no avail. From 2011, with Senate Bill 1341, which took away the earlier right of the county supervisors to regulate or limit the size of industrialized dairy feedlots. to 2015, when the legislature rejected the groundwater conservation area proposal for the Willcox area. Then again in 2020, when over 60 water bills were introduced, including a bill to create locally driven rural management areas, an alternative to INAs and AMAs, the very thing that the majority of residents have been asking for. This bill was not given a chance for a vote. In 2021, another rural management area bill given no hearing. 2022, members of the governor's non-AMA subcommittee form a new group after efforts to discuss rural groundwater protections are blocked. 2023, a local groundwater stewardship area bill is introduced in the legislature. House Bill 2731, Senate Bill 1306, by the House and Senate majority leaders. These bills are blocked again. 2024, the Water Policy Council recommendations are introduced as House Bill 2857, and that bill is blocked. Since 2011, there have been 711 new non-exempt wells drilled, the most, approximately 105 wells, in 2015, after Riverview came in, and again in 2022, approximately 147 wells. Oh, really? Okay. Thank you. May I add just one thing? We are at a point that none of us ever thought we would be at, and we can work together to make this work for all of us in a fair manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Glenn. Next up, Dan Stockwell. I will remind you to please speak as closely to the mic as you can, and then of course state your name and spell it as well for the record. Dan Stockwell. We will move on to Jim Verner, and then after that will be Michelle Brothers.
My name is Jim Verner. That's V. It's VERNER. I'm 82 years old, and about 3 months ago, I had a stroke, and so I'm still having difficulty speaking. So I asked you bear with me a little bit on that. Okay, I was born and raised in Phoenix. I hunted, fished, and over the whole state. When I was ready to retire about 8 years ago, I fell in love with cheese. Purchased my home in the Pierce Sunset area in 2016. With its gorgeous views, the Cherokee to the east and Cochise Stronghold to the west, I had found paradise. Now, from my earliest years growing up in the desert, I understood Arizona has limited resources, water, and they must be used efficiently. But the evidence presented in the meeting of September 26th confirmed fears about the significant depletion of the aquifer in the Willcox Basin. Putting out 3.5 times more water than it is in place, not sustainable. level. This level of the surface, many will dry. Now, while I specifically am very opposed to government encroaching on our freedoms, depletion of the aquifer is so severe, we must have an AMA to ensure sustainability of residents as well as some agriculture. And it's agriculture I want to address right now. As an agronomist, I managed international crop protection companies. And I also had a consulting company called Sustainable Air. And this focused on air, Latin America, Southern Europe, North Africa, and Middle East. Many fertilizer conferences in all, because my expertise and experience was in adapting fertilizer programs to control plant stress and water. I worked with virtually all the crops, field crops, vineyards, trees. Now, it's allowed here, it's impossible for the details of my work and how it improves water efficiency. I hope I can say enough so that farmers and home gardeners will be more information I'll gladly share. And I think it's interesting that when I first came here and I saw the climate and the water conditions, I went to several farms to see if they would be interested in trying some of the concepts that I had applied in other arid areas when they weren't interested. And maybe it's because they thought I was.
I'm sorry, sir. You reached your 3-minute limit.
Just a minute. Okay, perhaps they.
Sir, in respect for other speakers here today, you've reached your limit. Thank you.
I don't hear very well.
We can take your written comments if you'd like to provide them to us, and we can, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Werner. Next up is Michelle Brothers. After that will be Robbie Sproul.
My name is Michelle Brothers. I live a little bit east of Willcox. I'm sure the wells that have gone dry within a half of house not report you. We are all down, who knows how many feet. I had my pump dropped about 20 feet, can't go any lower than that. Sorry. I may have 20 feet of water in the well, and that's it.
Miss, excuse me, miss. We need you to speak into the microphone so that folks on, you just have to speak closer, please.
Close. Is this good now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Like I said, there are 3 wells that have been put in the last, I'd say, 1.5 to 2 years in my particular area, within a half a mile of my house. I'm down to maybe 50 feet of my next door neighbors, probably the same because they just started having problems this year. I don't care in this AMA where you are showing us how these big users, and yeah, they need it, the agriculture farmers and the ranchers. How are we going to conserve? Residentials obviously aren't going to do it, and they're going to be non-exempt wells. But if these big users don't have some conservation efforts, what good is it going to do?
Thank you, Ms. Brothers. Next up is Robbie Sproul, and after that will be Janet Randall.
Thank you, Casey. My name is Robbie Sproul, Robbiesproul. You might want to put a start at my name because I think I can save the ADWR a bunch of suits with what I do here. Anyway, I'm a rancher of a fourth generation ranch. That ranch has been in my family for 4 generations since the late 1800s. And we don't have issues with our wells. The water isn't dropping, probably because we're high in the aquifer. So I think that makes me representative to speak for all of this. I'm on several water committees. We've been working hard to try and present some solutions. And thank you, Lisa, for stating the bill I was going to state that did not pass. I'm very disappointed in our legislature. They have not done this a bit. I know water has been a big issue, but my concerns are local input into the process. Okay, first and foremost. And of course, the water. We all know that there is a problem. Definitely is. With all the fissures are dangerous, and the subsidence is permanent. It's going to affect the storage of our water forever. So with that in mind, that's going to affect our land values, already has. Will get worse. It's also going to affect our heritage for future generations. There's many farms and ranches and businesses that have been here for generations in this valley and in this aquifer. So I'm here today to discuss how I feel about the AMA. These are my feelings, not feelings of any groups that I'm on, any committees. But I needed about 6 or 7 minutes. 3's pretty short, so I'm going back. Anyway, I want to address 2 groups today. All the people behind me, all the committees that we're on, and all the hard work we've been putting into trying to come up with a solution. Okay? What I understand, the AMA is a last resort. You know, I understand the director, DWR, and the governor have to do something because it's a very public issue. So hopefully I got some solutions. We'll see. Anyway, the other group, it's you all, ADWR. But first, the group behind me, I want you all to think that ADWR is not our enemy. We need them. We can all come up with solutions for the problem, especially working together like a lot of us already have. But at some point, it's going to take some regulation of water usage. We all understand that. And that's where we need help from the ADWR. Okay, to ADWR. First of all, you've got a lot of facts and figures and data for us. You showed exactly how the aquifer is going down. And I would request that we kind of work with your expertise and knowledge. Talked to Ryan about this a couple of times, about geology for the recharge. You know, we have the hydrology and all that, but in my opinion, the first and foremost thing we should do for this water issue is to work very diligently on recharge. But we need some of your help for that. Okay? My time up already? Oh, no. Okay, can I have just 30 seconds, please? Because I have some important points. I'm going to just go ahead. We need your help to do that. Okay. Okay. The current AMA isn't going to help us, but we can come up with a plan that will. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Sproul. And again, you're welcome to write us your written comments as well. So thank you. Next up is going to be Janet Randall, please. And after that, Oscar Aguilar.
My name is Janet, JanetRandall. to the members and the audience. My name is Janet Randall, and I live in the northern part of Willcox Basin, where the ground is subsiding due to overpumping. Ground in this area has subsided more than 2.5 feet in the last 14 years. My neighbor to the west of my property has a well that has been destroyed by uneven subsidence. Her well casing is torn in half. It would cost her $50,000 to repair. My neighbor to the south is also having to haul water because of the drop in the water level. I had to deepen my well to the tune of $10,000 10 years ago, and do not know how long I have on that deepening before I run out of water. Due to uneven subsidence, my house is broken in half and is now unsellable and unsafe. I purchased this home nearly 25 years ago, and there was no evidence then of damage due to subsidence. I understand that in the mid to late 1990s, subsidence in this area was maybe 1 to 1.5 inches per year, compared to the 2.5 to 3.5 inches per year currently documented by ADR. The very noticeable damage in my home started around 2012. The pictures below, which I am going to submit to you, shows some of the current damage to my home. I wholeheartedly support an AMA to stop more wells and homes from being damaged by subsidence in this area. Thank you for considering designation of an AMA for the Willcox Basin.
Thank you, Ms. Randall. Next up is Oscar Aguilar. After that will be Don Gretzmacher. Sorry for bad enunciation. Oscar Aguilar. No Oscar? Okay. Next up is Don Gretzmacher. After that would be Torin Hodge. No Don Gretzmacher? Next up will be Torin Hodge. And after that, Sonia Gasho.
Hi, thank you. My name is Torin Hodge. It's Torinhodge. I represent my farm, Day Trails LLC. I'm currently farming a small vineyard in Pierce on my late grandmother's property. I studied agricultural engineering at the University of Arizona as an investment in my farming practices. Since I graduated in 2021, I've also been working as a scientist in row crop breeding, improving the water use efficiency of corn. Many of the vines we planted are newly released hybrids, which are resistant to Pierce's disease, a devastating pathogen that poses a significant threat to growers in the southern United States. Wines produced from these varieties will be novel for the state, and I'm willing to accept the risk that comes with establishing this new market. To make this happen, we need 5 acres planted in order to qualify for the farm winery license. I'm also 2 years deep into experimenting with wild Southwest grapevine species, such as Vitis arizonica, for use as drought-tolerant and Pierce's disease-resistant rootstocks. This is a decades-long project ahead that will eventually require the expansion of several additional acres for field testing. The results of these trials have the potential to benefit both growers and breeders in the state and throughout the Southwest. I have deep sympathy for my neighbors in Cochise County whose wells have run dry. I also understand there is an urgent need to protect our water resources. However, this proposed AMA seems to threaten both my research and my farm. If this goes through, my only option may be to seek property outside of the county or even outside of the state. This is something I cannot afford, and it would severely delay my research and it completely. My ask is that if you move forward with an AMA, to please include nuance in the legislation that will not only allows small family wine growers like myself to continue operations, but also to encourage new innovative farmers to enter the industry and support our local economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Next up is Sonia Shao. After that will be Dan Pierce.
Water is precious, particularly in the desert. Water is life.
Could you please state your name and spell it for the
I'm
record?
getting there. Something we all agree on. My name is Sonia Gasho, Sonia-Gasho, and I am a local rancher in Pierce. I work with the Cochise County Farm and Livestock Bureau, Cochise Graham Cattle Growers, and I'm a local business owner. 2 years ago, the people of Willcox voted no on an initiative to enact an AMA. Governor Hobbs and Director Bushatsky's disdain of that decision is insulting and appears to be from a bureaucratic, we know best, dictatorial position. The people have spoken and that should never be ignored. Governor Hobbs and Director Bushatsky should be here in person. An AMA is the wrong management tool for this valley. Enacting an AMA will stop irrigation expansion and fulfill the public's demand for something to happen. In this 30-second soundbite culture, it sounds like a clear-cut decision and that changes will happen right away. It is not. It is a complex, difficult, and nuanced decision that should not be chosen lightly or as a so-called only choice. It will not put water back into anyone's well or fill in fissures. It won't stop the quote big guys from farming. It will stymie the wine industry's growth across the state as 85% of the grapes are grown in this area, and an AMA will freeze vineyards at their current acreage. It does not allow flexibility for adaptation of new technologies. It will adversely affect the local economy as agriculture is the main economic driver in this valley following government-related jobs. Over the past 3 years, we've often heard nothing is happening. This is simply not true. 2 or more public coalitions, like the SSWA and the RWA, have been formed, bringing all water use sectors to the table. Robust conversations have taken place, and at least one charge project has been funded. 2 bills were drafted in the legislature. Though neither passed, this shows a recognition of the need for and great effort to find appropriate alternatives, particularly on agriculture's part. This begs the question how to move forward if an AMA isn't the right fit. Recharge projects, irrigation districts, and a residential water district should all be investigated and considered for implementation. True incentives for recognition of and for water conservation practices must be a part of any work. I call on the director and Governor Hobbs to stop giving environmental activist groups preference and end partisan political party maneuvering. I urge Governor Hobbs to not insist on her Water Council's recommendations above the voice of our communities and neighbors that live and work here. Instead, let us come back to the table with the department, council, legislature, local work groups, and the governor to build on the efforts already made and find a legislative option that will work, not only for the Willcox Basin, but for all of Arizona.
Thank you, Ms. Gashow. Next up is Dan Pierce, and after that will be Barbara Pierce.
Dan Pierce, Pierce.
Sir, speak into the microphone.
Speak. Address. I'm talking to these people. I'm sorry, but anyway, dear Director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, in 2022, the citizens of Willcox Groundwater Basin voted against an active management area. As vineyard owners in the Willcox American Viticulture area, we are still opposed to the creation of an active managed area. In the Willcox Basin, an AMA is not the right solution for the problem. Developing a vineyard takes a large amount of money, capital, and time. We're in the process of developing 78 acres on the Willcox Bench into a vineyard, winery, and tasting room. We have 32 acres of wine grapes in production. We are currently developing another 25 acres of grapevines, and we have cleared land and are bringing a 1,000-foot well online. We drilled and certified the well with the AZ DWR in 2022, and we have a 6-inch irrigation valve at the high point for developing acreage and beginning to lay it out. The cultivation of wine grapes is sustainable within Willcox Basin. Vineyards do not draw more water than the average rainfall. They should be classified as sustainable agriculture. With proper vineyard management, unplanted areas, roads and rows, and unagriable natural arroyos can be converted to flow into retention and recharge basins. Grapes are sustainable water crop in this region. Vines are drip irrigated and require 8 to 10 gallons per day. These practices can put vineyards further on the minus side of water usage per acre. The Arizona wine industry is an economic engine for the entire state, Cochise County, the city of Willcox. It positively impacts jobs, income, business revenue, and taxes. Wine tourism has direct effect on local hotels, restaurants, and other businesses in this region. Times have changed since the legislation of an AMA was enacted in 1980. It was created to manage water basins that had both groundwater and surface water for implementation of urban development. The Willcox Basin does not have surface water resources and no potential for urban development. A better solution than the AMA needs to be developed to reduce water overdraft and improve the recharge of the water in the basin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. Next up is Barbara Pierce. After that will be Robert Carlson.
My name is Barbara Pierce, Barbara Pierce. I am here to represent the Arizona Wine Growers Association. On behalf of the Arizona Wine Growers Association, AWGA, we'd like to express our opposition to the designation of the active management area within the Willcox Ground Basin. The implementation of such a program would have a devastating effect on the Arizona vibrant grape and wine industry and prevent it from realizing its potential. As the industry more fully develops in recent decades, it was with the express intent of cultivating wine grapes that require low water usage and are fit for Arizona's dry conditions. Therefore, the AWGA feels that subjecting wine growers and vineyards to the regulation of this imposed AMA is the wrong approach. To the industry that has made a conscious effort to be good stewards of the state water resources. Since 1981, AWGA has advocated on behalf of wine growers across Arizona and would like to point out that wine growing is a rapid emerging industry in the state, with average nearly doubling from 2012 to 2017, from 942 to 1,500 acres, and the acres of grapes continuing to increase. While 75% of the grapes grown in Arizona wine production is grown in the Willcox groundwater basin, the water, coupled with unique fertile soil in this region, are vital to the continued advancement of Arizona wine. The industry has grown tenfold, with bonded wineries from 12 in 1999 to 156 in 2022. This growth continues to be a natural fit for tourism and Arizona's top export industry, and it's critical for part of tourism success. In summary, Arizona wine grapes are low water use, high-value crop, and the establishment of an AMA in the Willcox groundwater basin would have a serious and irreparable negative consequence, not only to AWGA members, but on the Arizona wine industry overall. It would severely inhibit its ability to grow grapes, manufacture its wines, and produce high-quality economic development through rural Arizona. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Next up is Robert Carlson, and then after that, Chad Preston.
Thank you. My name is Robert Bob Carlson. I speak on behalf of myself and my winery and vineyard, Carlson Creek. I'd like to echo the Pierces in their comments. I think the AMA is a blunt instrument that will.
Just a little bit closer, Mike. Yeah, thank you.
The AMA is a blunt instrument that I think can be, should not be implemented by fiat in light of the recent voting. I think the AMA is something that is a last resort. And I also think that at this point in time, working with the local constituencies to find a more nuanced way to manage this water, because everyone agrees there's a problem, but we don't think an AMA is the solution to that problem. And we urge both the governor and the director to think twice before doing that, especially in light of the fact that a lot of the evidence that you presented here is anecdotal in review, and I'm not sure would withstand the ultimate resolution that may be sought by some entities associated with this. I would urge you to try to work with us and find a way that could work better. And I know everyone has a lot of suggestions at what might work better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Up next is Chad Preston, and after that will be John Palotz.
I'm Chad Preston, CHAD-PRESTON. My wife and I own Birds and Barrels Vineyards. We moved from Mesa, Arizona 15 years ago. It's hard to follow my colleagues. They've hit all the main points, so I'm just going to kind of hit a little bit on what we're thinking about this AMA. We're opposed to the AMA, and we're not just winemakers and grape growers. We're your neighbors, okay? I am very empathetic to people's foundations breaking and wells collapsing, but if you pass this AMA, if this goes through, nothing will change except there won't be any expansion. All these huge people pumping water, it will stay the same. It will be grandfathered in, and all these graphs, they'll just continue to go down. We are at zero groundwater overdraft in our vineyard. And we actually are experimenting with technology that we can actually reduce our water by another 40%, but it's not going to change it. The AMA will not change groundwater overdraft. It will only stifle growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Preston. Next up is John Palotz. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong.
Good afternoon. Is that thing working? Good afternoon. My name is John Bolts, JOHNBOELTS. I serve as the president of Arizona Farm Bureau Federation. Arizona agriculture sector significantly contributes to the state's economy, providing an economic benefit of nearly $31 billion, ensuring local and national food security, preserving open space, and offering continuous watershed management. In 2022, the voters of Cochise County clearly expressed their opposition to such measures by rejecting Proposition 420, which aimed to designate the Willcox groundwater basin as an AMA. Given this recent decision by the community, we implore the governor and ADWR to respect the electorate's will and collaborate with their legislative representatives to protect both the environmental integrity and economic vitality of this basin, as well as others throughout the state. This action comes at a time when legislative proposals, which have been under constructive negotiation, were poised to introduce sustainable changes to Arizona's groundwater management structure. The agricultural community has invested considerable time and effort over the past year to develop a regulatory framework that would be suitable for our rural communities. especially those identified as critical basins. This collaborative effort has produced legislation offering alternatives to the establishment of new AMAs in areas where they are not appropriate for addressing groundwater challenges such as the Willcox Basin. An AMA designation is not merely a square peg in a round hole. It's a fundamental mismatch of a solution to the problems that exist here in the Cochise Basin. And really, it's a solution. It's not really a solution at all. Farmers in Cochise should be growing cattle, beans, chili, corn, and not worrying about whether their faces will end up on the side of a milk carton as missing people. It's time to face the issues, and it's time to address it legislatively and not institute an AMA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bolts. Next up is Joanna Seeley, and then after that will be Jacques Vanderlilly.
Good afternoon. My name is Joanna Seeley, Joanna, S as in Sam, Eeley. I'd like to ask these folks back here, one, how many actually read the ballot measure? It stated that the governor would gather a committee to help resolve this issue that we're having. How many of you who are clapping and hollering in the back of the room is willing to work with everybody else to resolve this? I have been working with people for the playa for the last year, and we have been fighting against get tax power to for the Willcox playa. They want to come in and they want to drill for lithium. 500,000 gallons of water per 1 metric ton lithium produced. Can we afford that? No, we can't. But can we get people?
Excuse me, miss. Could you direct towards, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Can we get people to actually work on these committees? No. Everybody talks and talks and talks. They have blinders on. They can't see the overall program. We need people will work with us to try to solve this problem. We don't need a bunch of hollering and clapping and everything. We need people who will work. The governor put together a committee called Rural Groundwater Area Committee or something like that. It was in the ballot on 2022. It stated that the governor would put a committee together. They had a beautiful resolution to this. It had to go to the Natural Resources and Energy Committee. It didn't even get out of there. Why? Because the chairman did not want a people solution. She wanted it her own self. So she put together SB 1221, which did not go through it did not pass. So here we are still. We are not solving anything. We've got to solve it. The AMA is not perfect, but by golly, it's better than nothing. Our house has 3 cracks in it. Our patio is sinking. We have fissures about a half a mile away from the house.
I'm sorry, you're at your 3-minute time.
Okay, but that's my opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Seeley. Next up is Jacques Vanderlilly. After that will be James Schmidt.
My name is Jacques Vanderlilly. It's spelled like Jacques, and my last name is Derlelij. I'm farming 10 miles north of this town. What I have to say is that this looks like election interference because we voted 2 years ago and the vote was overwhelming no on this deal. And now something changed here. Let's put it on the ballot again in 2 years from now and vote over it. Because that's the democratic way where everybody talks about. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is James Schmidt. After that will be Philip Asbury.
I'm James Schmidt of Dragoon. The late great Ronald Reagan, the nine most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from government and I'm here to help. Been in government for 29 years. I'm very familiar with it. As was said, we voted no on an AMA. And the governors decided we need an AMA. So she's imposing her will upon us. And we said no. There's no one in this room that wastes water. I know a lot of these people in the room. I was a USDA guy in this county for 10 years. These people don't waste water. We know there's a drought. You're telling us the presentation was right, and you told us what we already knew, that there's a water issue. An AMA, which at least half of the members on that board of that AMA will be out of Phoenix, who have no interest in this county, have no business being here in this county, telling this county what to do with its water. If you want to form some kind of organization that's not necessarily an AMA, then that's fine. But it should be made up 100% of Cochise County people because they're the ones that have the vested interest in it. You know, I looked it up, didn't find where the state of Arizona owns the water. The water property belongs to me. The water under the property of these people out here belong to them. That's a fact. There's no law that says that it is. So why does the governor think that she has the ability to tell us what to do with our property and with our water? It's an absolute fact. Cochise County is an agricultural county. With agriculture, with no water, there's no agriculture. When there's no water, there are no people. That's an absolute fact. It doesn't take much. Now these all folks are from Phoenix, and you have an AMA in Phoenix is what it said. There's 612 swimming pools up there. Get an average use annual basis of 17. And it has a 100% evaporation rate based on your own information. The 11 water use 500,000 gallons of water. You're allowing that on your AMA in Phoenix. You want to come down here and tell us how to use that water. You're allowing that to occur. Golf courses, 800,000 gallons a day. 800,000, 219 golf courses in this county. We have fountains, we have slip and slides, we have all kinds of things that use water. And you want to tell these people, myself, how big my garden can be, that I can expand my crops, but I can't use more water. I can put more cows on my ranch, but I can't use more water. How in the world is that good management? Who came up with that kind of a thing? That's not good management. That's not looking out for people in Cochise County. We do have a problem. There are people here who have an absolute problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, next up is Philip Asbury. After that will be Philip Klump.
Thank you for being here. I'm Philip Asbury, PHIP ASBURY. I'm a pastor here in town. That's not why I'm here. For over 20 years, I did agricultural studies for the local utility. Almost everything we said today, we could have said in 1975. Nothing has changed. The patterns of the scale would be a little different. The S shape of your curve is not rain.
Please speak into the mic, sir.
It's because the irrigated acreage dropped from 175,000 acres to 50,000, and we grew tumbleweeds for about 20 years. No jobs. Look into that, okay? Thank you. We did vote, and I think people ought to be listening to that vote, but we didn't get to vote on a solution. We need to help one another, and probably we need a district, water basin wide, to help people with these problems, help them deepen their wells when they need to, help them solve the structural problems and fill in the fissures or whatever. We need to help one another. I notice here, if all pumping stopped today, it would take over 280 years for the aquifer to recover. Is that the goal? To preserve our resources or to wisely use our resources? You showed how the water table is dropping. You didn't show how deep the water is. You said we pump 5 to 7 million gallons. How much is there? How much have we used? I worked with the Ag Extension Service, just cooperated with them. They recommended when we could no longer grow the crops of the 70s that we put in tree crops and dairies. And improve our irrigation efficiency. We did that, didn't we? After everybody's done what to do, it's not their fault. We want our kids and grandkids to have jobs too. So we do need to solve the problem. We need to look more at what the real situation is instead of a statewide, state-centered solution. And again, we need to know how much of the resource have we used? Are we in danger of depleting it, or have we just dropped it 5%? What's the deal? Obviously, though, when somebody's house starts falling down, that's a problem, and we need to be willing to help solve that problem. So I just don't think we're really talking about all the problem realistically. And this is not new. I've been working on this since the 70s. And some of the people in Phoenix it sounds new to some of those folks. So let's actually let's look at the facts and let's work together to help one another, right? I know some of these people have real problems, and that we can work together without this particular solution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Next up is Philip Klump. After that will be State Representative Lupe Diaz.
Good afternoon once again. 3 months ago, I told all of you.
Please speak into the mic, please.
My name is Philip Klump. I'm opposed to the AMA. 3 months ago at the last meeting, I told all of you to call me up and we would go look at a recharge. There's only one man come to my house to look at the recharge, and he is, I think, the second in command to the the Attorney General. Anyways, none of the rest he called me, oh, nothing, not a peep from you. He actually took like 4 hours of his day to come visit me. Poor feller. Took him out and got him lost in the bushes. But anyways, I understand that everybody feels for the people that have water has depleted and whatever, but I don't know nothing about it. All I know is cows. My family been here since 1904. We watched it go from 6 foot to whatever it was. Okay? It's just the act of God, because it has not rained since the great flood that God created. And it hadn't rained real good since 1998. Okay. So if you want to talk about recharge, come to my house. I'll give you my number. It's 520-253-0742. If you want to talk about recharge, I can help. Otherwise, I'm going home. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Klump. Next up is State Representative Lupe Diaz. After that will be Jesse Davis.
Hello, my name is Lupe Diaz, Lupediaz, and I'm state representative. Imposing an AMA is not something that I'm looking forward to here. I think there are much better solutions. And as we've heard from the people today, and that's who I represent, that they don't want an AMA. There is a problem here. I do believe that there's a local solution. And many of you have already stated much of the concerns and the facts that are hitting the area. The economy in Cochise County is going to go down because of the limitation, and also the coming against the agriculture. The property values are going to be, those are things that many of the people are concerned with. We don't need that AMA. Director, I hope that you're hearing that. And the governor, I hope that you're hearing that as well. The AMA was vetoed 2 years ago, and we were here during that process and help that process. And I think that we need to make sure that we honor the voice of the people. This is a unilateral decision that the governor do through the director of ADWR, which is not right. And again, there's a lot of you that have invested a lot of money here. I do believe that the solution is a local solution. I've heard many of you speak of a local solution out here, and what we need to do is give it a little bit more time to be able to get that done. Many believe that legislature has failed you. I can tell you that we worked hard to try to come up with several solutions. Governor, as far as I've counted, has vetoed. She has vetoed several. I'm looking at this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's been opposed by the other side. 6 bills that were specifically aimed at the Willcox Water Basin, and there have been in one of the bills that has been worked on. There was 112 meetings that were conducted to be able to help solve some of this at the legislative level, and we've just been hitting an impasse with the governor. And then for her to come in and veto, to impose an AMA, I just found that, egregious to be able to hear that. There are solutions, and some of you have already talked about that. Recharge, augmentation, the conservation of water is important. And also there are alternative water studies that are going on right now that are not matching the Willcox Water Basin. The University of Arizona and others are also looking at that as well. So thank you very much. Let's stand together and see the AMA come up with some solutions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Next up is Jesse Davis. After that will be Mike Ware.
Well, being here, my name is Jesse Davis, Jesse Davis, Davis. My operation is the Sierra Bonita Ranch, which is northwest of Willcox, at the periphery of your map, with no well monitoring of sorts by your group. I call it a group because it seems like it's unfairly biased, and you're lumping this entire valley together as one water source. I have a hard time with the data that's being presented because I feel it's sufficiently done. Measuring the static water level of wells. If you're going to impose a restriction on the entire valley, I suggest you measure every single well, and that includes every owner's well, as well as every agricultural well. My water levels have not dropped substantially, maybe 10 feet in 25 years. That's on only a couple of my wells. Some of the ones that aren't being pumped have not dropped at all. 0. If an AMA goes through, and I have not garnered grandfather rights through capital investment, you are taking 60% of my land value away from my property. My loan officer is not going to like that. The property rights and the property value are two paramount problems with the structure of this AMA. I also am a member of the Cattle Growers Association. I'm on 2 water councils. I'm on 2 water committees. I'm a former board member of the cattle growers. My family has been in this area for 6 generations. 1872, we arrived. I have farming acreage. I have farmable acreage, and I have ground that I rent out to a neighboring farmer. We present, everybody here is, not everybody, but people who are like-minded as I am, do not feel that the AMA is a proper solution. There are other solutions available. I am also a member of the newly formed Sulphur Springs Water Alliance that was formulated because we heard that the governor might want to put an AMA in, and we wanted to come together with a cohesive group, which started as what I consider a think tank, to come together and bring in all sorts of different perspectives. We were going along at a pretty good clip considering of the different perspectives that were in that group. And unfortunately, on October 23rd, take note of the timing, approximately November the 5th, the governor decided that that was going to be a good time to put in an AMA.
You reached your 3-minute time limit, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Next up is Mike Ware, and after that will be Alan Robs.
Mike Ware, Mikwear. I'm a 5th generation Willcox born rancher. My family's been in this valley a long time. We've seen the water woes consistently. And those woes have not changed in my lifetime, my 66 years. They've been the same. There's winners and losers, as I heard somebody else speak earlier. If you're over good water, that's your tenant right to that water. That water belongs to you and your land. And for the state to come in and say that I can't do something with my water is absolutely undemocratic, in my opinion. We took a vote, we didn't want it. Now the governor comes in and wants to apply Maricopa County issues to Cochise County. It's not. I don't see how that could begin. I go back on my wells. I heard Jesse Davis talk about his dropping. I heard Robbie Scott talk about his wells not dropping. I just had 2 replaced on my wells. Not one static inch is gone in 10 years. And I live off from the western slopes of the Cherokee Mountains. So we're in a recharge, but you're lumping all of us and decreasing our land values because you're lumping all of us into the problem that exists elsewhere. We are the recharge areas. You're causing us to have land devaluations because we're in a recharge area. And it's got to rain to recharge. Like Philip Plump said, if we don't have recharge, we can't do nothing. How much water's down there? You don't know. None of us know. How much are we using? For the sustainability of it, we need to think about those parts of it, not just continue to say, oh, we're pumping it out. You go buy a piece of property, you base your piece of property values on the amount of water that's beneath it. That's why you got good areas we got areas that they build homes. There's no water, but the land was cheap. Well, you think the land was cheap to begin with? It was cheap because there was no water there to begin with. My values have not, I'm trying to hurry. My static levels have not dropped. I saw on one of those maps up there, you got a dot where I had ADWR come out and check a well. They said your static is dropped, but your little pointer didn't go to that well and say, hey, you only focus on that magnetic area, that purple area on your map. Think about the outline areas. Again, I'm opposed to the AMA, and I think that Governor Hobbs should have never, ever gone to the extent to utilize some sort of order through the director to do such a thing that impact us in Cochise County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ware. Next up is Alan Robs. After that will be Rod Kneeling.
Yeah, my name is Alan Hobbs. The last name is spelled Obbs. I was born and raised here. My dad started farming here in 1955, and we've been involved in agriculture my whole life here. And what my dad always said was the only thing hell needs is water. And so, you know, when we're farming, what we're always thinking about is conserving water, and the people that are farming are not wasting their water right now because they know it's the most valuable resource they have. But the AMA, I think, is going to, it's not going to help anything because it's going to, the people who are already pumping have already got their wells established. And it's only going to hurt people who might want to come down here and have a little homestead for 5 or 10 acres or start a little vineyard. It's going to penalize all those people. And it's not going to really affect anything that I can see except our whole economy in a negative way.
Thank you, Mr. Robs. Up next is Rod Keeling. After that will be Jacob Karchner.
Thank you for the record. My name is Rod Keeling, Keeling. My wife Jan Schaefer and I own Keeling Schaefer Vineyards. We've been here 25 years in March. I'm also the president of the Cochise Graham Wine Council, which is our local winery group. We have 17 members, and they are all in the Willcox Basin. They all farm in the Willcox Basin. We developed a position in opposition to the AMA public referendum in 2022. That as everybody in this room knows, that referendum failed almost 60-40. So that was the public vote that everybody's talking about. I think it's important for us to recognize and respect that vote that took place in 22. Our
sir, would you mind speaking a little bit closer to the mic? Thank you.
Our partnership still continues to oppose the creation of AMA, this time by the administrative order. There's one person in the state that can enact an AMA by administrative order, and that is the director of the department. So he has to take full responsibility for whatever he decides to do. But I would like to, my job today, we've heard a lot of issues about why the AMA won't work. Everybody understands the water problem that exists. However, my job today is to kind of punch a few holes into your data. And so the first thing I want to talk about is we'll go down by the list of the criteria that will allow the director to enact the AMA. What are the practices that are necessary to preserve the existing supply of groundwater future needs? Number one, you haven't conducted a flow model. This is all based on the 2023 supply and demand report that you guys have published, and it's online, available to anybody in the room. You have not, by your own discussion or by your own admission, that you have not conducted a groundwater flow model, which I think would be pretty important to justify an AMA. Number two, all the results and the assessment in the actual report are based on models. They're not all empirical. Number three, the baseline data in the assessment indicates that in 2022, the demand was 14.4%. The supply, I'm sorry, the demand, the withdrawal of water in this basin was 14.4% less than it was in 2005. Nobody talked about that today. That's, in addition, it was 0.25% less on a 30-year average. So the water use has actually gone down, even in spite of the additional acreage that we've seen over the last 15 years. If we give the grandfathered rights, which is a function of AMA, in fact, the person do it, identify the irrigators, and you're going to give them grandfathered rights, we're going to transfer a general right to a.
Sorry, you've reached your 3-minute limit.
Okay. We continue to oppose the AMA, and we would encourage you all to, and I've submitted all this paperwork.
Thank you, Mr. Keeling. Next up is Jacob Karchner. After that will be State Representative Stacy Tavers. Travers, sorry.
My name is Jacob Karchner, Jacobkartchner. I'm here representing the Cochise Graham Cattle Growers Association, representing over 130 families that have been land stewards for generations, over hundreds of thousands of acres that are going to be affected by this. What I'm here to do today is read you a water policy that we've come up with, and just get to it. So ranchers play a critical part in water conservation and management. Our intent is to protect water and its usage for future generations of farmers and ranchers. Cochise Graham Cattle Growers Association supports the following for all watersheds, basins, aquifers, and other sources of water. We support the protection of local farmers and ranchers' beneficial use of water for agriculture. We support protection of historic surface and groundwater rights. We support encouraging comprehensive hydraulic and geologic studies by independent third-party entities in order to obtain the necessary data for determination of aquifer characteristics and informed decision-making. We support the development of viable aquifer recharge areas, adoption and implementation of voluntary water conservation practices, local planning and development for water management, including within management areas. And we also support upholding the prohibition on the interbasin transfer of water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karchner. Next up is State Representative Stacy Travers. Stacy Travers. All right, we'll move on to State Representative Stephanie Stahl Hamilton. After that will be Aka Alex Cornadelli.
Good afternoon. Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, STEPHANIE, STAHLHAMILTON. My name is Stephanie Stahl Hamilton, and I am proud to represent Legislative District 21, which encompasses portions of Pima, Santa Cruz, and Cochise counties. I grew up in rural Arizona and have seen firsthand the challenges that rural communities face with our water supplies, which guides so much of my work at the legislature. During my time in the legislature, I am lucky to have gotten to know and listen to so many of the Willcox locals and learn about their deeply concerning water issues. These amazing people, their tenacity and relentless pursuit to find solutions to their groundwater depletion is why I am here today. I have mixed emotions about this hearing. On the one hand, I am enthusiastic that they are finally being heard. The science is being followed and an active management area is finally being considered. Based on the ADWR presentation given on September 26th, the Willcox Basin is more than qualified for an AMA designation. But on the other hand, I also feel like we failed the people of the Willcox Basin by not developing an alternative local groundwater management tool that truly mitigates the excessive groundwater depletion. Our lack of action has resulted directly in too many wells going dry and people's livelihoods ruined. And I want to take a minute to put one thing on the record that is important for the people served by the Willcox Basin to know. We've heard that Senate Bill 1221 is the answer. It is not the answer, and simple math will illustrate this. The Willcox Supply and Demand Study projects that for every 1 acre foot of water entering the basin, about 3 acre feet are being sucked out. That's a 300% water withdrawal in comparison to what is being returned to the basin. SB 1221 only allows for a maximum of 15% reduction in water conservation. The math doesn't add up. Water depletion will continue at an alarming rate. While we continue to negotiate with those in power to develop a more flexible, meaningful solution, it bears repeating that an AMA is simply the only option available today that even approaches being able to provide relief to this community. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I stand alongside the locals served by the Willcox Basin in full support of science and ask the ADWR to follow the science by designating an AMA. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Aka Alex Cornadelli, and after that would be Melanie Lawrence. No, Alex? All right, next would be Melanie Lawrence. After that would be Carol Walty.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for being here and having this meeting. I am here in support of the AMA, Melanie Lawrence, MELANIE, I am a resident of Cochise County and the Willcox Basin. I am here to speak about the residents that are being affected by this lack of an AMA. I want to point out that water is not red, it's not blue, and it's not green. This is not a partisan issue, and I get upset when our issues are being dismissed, our concerns are being dismissed as radical environmental extremism. I believe that many of the measures that have been put before the legislature are smoke and mirrors and are not substantial answers to the issues that we face. My understanding is that there is flexibility in how the management plan is created so that the AMA would have some flexibility to address the concerns of ranchers, farmers, and the ag users. I also believe that there was a lot of misinformation that went out before the 2022 AMA issue was on the ballot. I personally know of people that told me that their personal wells were going to be measured, and I tried to correct this information, and they were not willing to listen to. They had been told that, no, this was going to be a top-down government coming in and telling them how much water they could use in their personal wells. So I believe that part of the reason why the ballot measure failed was because there was a lot of misinformation, and there was the idea that there were all kinds of solutions that were going to be put forward. And I have not seen anything, nothing substantial has been put before the people as a solution. So I'll leave it at that. I understand the concerns of the ranchers, the farmers, and so forth that say that their livelihoods are going to be diminished, but I am part of the economy of this area just as much as they are. I pay my taxes. I live and work in this area. I'm retired, but I do work part-time. So anyway, I am just as much a part of the economy as anybody else here. And when my well drops to the point that I'm going to have to somehow find $40,000 or $50,000 to put into casing it further down. I just want to know that, you know, if someone's willing to, you know, start a GoFundMe project so that I can, you know, so that I can deepen my well, I'm all for it. But otherwise, we need something substantial. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Next up is Carol Walty, and after that, Bob Munger. Carol Walty. We'll move on to Bob Munger. No Bob Munger. Okay. Next will be Steve Kessel.
So my name's, am I close enough? Can you hear me? My name is Steve Kissel, Stevekisiel. I live in the southern part of the Willcox Basin, been living here for 25 years, a 60-year resident of Arizona. I understand the stark reality of living in a desert climate, especially in the middle of a 30-year drought. It's frustrating. I've been working on this issue now for almost 4 years. And it's frustrating to hear so much misinformation today about what an AMA will or will not do and what's going on with our water basin. I applaud ADWR's efforts to try to give us the best information available. I firmly believe that the hydrology folks at ADWR are presenting this information without any bias and are trying to help us understand what's happening here. The reality is, even if you don't believe ADWR's data today, the reality is wells are going dry all across the basin. My well went dry almost 12 years ago to the date. It's been dropping an average of 4.5 feet over 30 years now. We just had the well sweep here in the Willcox Basin last couple weeks ago by ADWR. I have people calling me from all over the basin. My well went down 10 feet. My well went down 5 feet this year. These are not short-term trends either. These are long-term trends. We've been seeing this. If you live in the Sun and Zone area now, you're lucky if your well's not dropping 10 feet a year. What do you say to those folks? Do you know what they live next to? Have you ever looked at a satellite photo of all those center pivots that are right next to their land? New center pivots, most of them. We cannot go on like this. We've got to come together as a community. We've got people that are being deeply affected, seriously affected. You saw the picture of Janet Randall's house that's cracking in half. You can say that subsidence isn't real, but to her it's real. She's got gaps in her house 2 to 3 inches where the walls have cracked. She's waiting, she's just hoping her house doesn't collapse on her before she dies. This is a serious issue and we all need to be well informed. There are a number of issues that were raised here today about what an AMA will or will not do. The reality is AMA is not perfect. And I totally support a better solution, but we need an AMA today because when I drove here today, I saw 3 new fields being cleared. There's another field on 191 right across from Curry Farms started being cleared, 440 acres for trees. Every one of those is another straw in the ground that's going to deepen all of our water levels. We can't deny. Sure, there are folks that live on the periphery of the basin and their wells are maybe stable or going up. But that's not the overall picture. 90% or more of all the wells in this basin are going down. Take your heads out of the sand and wake up.
Sir?
The land that's subsiding up to 3.5
Excuse me, sir, you've reached your time limit.
Fissures have grown dramatically. We need to do something now. AMA is our only solution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Kathy Collins, and then will be Ben Benches.
I'm Kathy Collins, CATHYCOLLINS. My husband David is with me. I'm quote, E.M. Tiffany, I believe in the future of agriculture with a faith born not of words, but of deeds. We are concerned about the availability of water. Our future depends on it, just as the future of our towns depends on it. We believe in the future and of a safe and abundant life in our valley. Our family has been farming here since 1952. That's 72 years. And we hope to be able to pass the farm on to the fourth and fifth generations. We have a son moving home to the farm in 2026. Joshua is a plumber and his wife is a registered nurse. Our youngest son, Jonathan, is on his mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Upon his return in 2 years, he will continue his education at the University of Arizona in agronomy and has plans to live in the Willcox area after his graduation. Another of our sons, Jacob, and his family moved here 3 years ago this summer. He is an Empire Cat certified technician and his wife is an acro certified gymnast instructor. Having completed 3 years of experience working on the farm, he is preparing to use the first-time farmer services at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. He has been planning to make some improvements on our farm to increase viability and sustainability for the future. These plans do not include drilling new wells, but using land in different ways. Our future depends on there being water for many years to come in this valley. We are committed to being a part of the solution, as all water users should be. In 22, the local community spoke. The process was followed to put it on the ballot, and more than 61% of the voters voted to not have an AMA in the Willcox Basin. The decision was made by those who live and work in the Willcox Basin. We strongly believe that it is wrong for someone from the government office in Phoenix to completely ignore the results of an overwhelming certified vote and mandate a rule that will not improve our current situation. I am here to state that an AMA will not solve our water problems in this valley. An AMA will not make the earth fissures close up or the earth repair itself where subsidence has occurred. The AMA will not curtail current water use levels. Let's pursue legislation that can really help. We agree some regulations should be put in place. These regulations should address directly the use of water in the valley. Our valley needs any fees collected to pay for planning and projects to improve our water outlook and alleviate our homeowners' worries. Designating an AMA does not guarantee funds to stay in our area or local control. We believe our farm has a bright future. The future will bring changes in our farming practices and possibly our cropping choices. We look forward to the challenge and the changes. We are concerned about those who do not have access to water at their homes. These are conversations we should be having to come up with solutions. We see why an AMA sounds like it solves problems that we are having, but an AMA will squelch the ability for local community to find workable, useful, localized solutions. We ask the director, Buchowski, and any advisors he may counsel, make this
Ms.
decision
Collins.
with careful consideration.
Thank you. Next up is Ben Menges. After that will be Timothy Klump.
My name is Ben Mingus, Benmenges. I'm a Graham County cattle rancher. State government looks at the data they obtained of water levels declining and they say, wow, we need more control. I look at the data of groundwater declining, additional skeptic, and then I say, well, if that's true, Willcox may need a large water infrastructure project to bring more water to this area. Willcox needs more water resources transferred to this basin, and who better to take that on than the Arizona Department of Water Resources? That's the win-win solution. Yet you, the state government, seek governmental control as an obvious lose for this valley's economy. How can this valley ever hope to grow if the solution of bringing more water into this basin is ignored? If a large water infrastructure project were to be undertaken to bring more water into the Willcox Basin, it would hardly be the largest water project Arizona has ever undertaken. More water evaporates out of Tempe Town Lake in 3 days in the summer than my cows drink in a year. My ranch feeds 5,670 American families every year, and we use our water effectively, and that's what you hope to suppress. Shame on DWR for not undertaking a more reasonable option for Willcox. Shame on the governor for not being here, or at least the director for not being present at this meeting. And that alone says that they don't care about the economy of this area.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Timothy Klump, and then it'll be Ben Megas. Done it twice, sorry.
Hello, my name is Timothy Klump. I'm a fifth generation rancher in this valley. I'm against the AMA. We've had a lot of water wells go dry in my life and my grandpa's life. Before that, my great grandpa wells in this area go dry. That's just part of life of living here. And as far as it goes, the fissures, my great grandpa almost died in a fissure because they pop up everywhere. It's always been here. There's always been fissures. But anyways, we had a government, we had a vote. We said we didn't want the AMA. We want to have the community. We want to have this area open for the people in the future to figure out how to live here. Because there's things about this country. It has thorns. It has everything that wants to kill you. Everything wants to make you run out of water. And that's just life here. So the people that live here, we got to know it. And I want you to tell everybody whenever they think about moving out here, because they get on the internet and they say, what's the cheapest place to live in Arizona? And they say, oh, look, I can buy a ranch for 40 acres down here. And that's cheap. Yeah, it's cheap. Tell them that there's no water. Tell them not to come. We don't need it. We don't need a bunch of whiny ass people. So just tell the governor she needs to quit drinking so much wine, learn how the hell to grow some grapes. Okay? Tell her to get down here. She needs to be here with us. If she's going to take away our rights, take away everything we got, this isn't something like, oh, I get to retire in 12 years. I got my INA, my thing. I'm sorry for cussing, but I got my retirement plan. We got a retirement plan because you invested it in your kids' future. My grandpa invested in my future. His dad invested in theirs. We're not getting rich out here. Tell her to quit messing with everything. And I've had 15 wells go dry in my lifetime. It had nothing to do with pumping. It had to do with there's no rain. We got to adapt. We got to change. There's no government mandate going to change that. They're not going to make my wells come back. I am going to be here after all you guys are retired and you guys live in Washington. You guys live in Georgia. You probably don't even live in this country. You're probably going to live somewhere else. So the thing is, I'm going to be here, and that little fart right there is going to be there too. There isn't going to be any well that goes dry that's going to drive me out. There's not going to be any government that drives me out either. So anyways, that's all I need to say. You guys can think that you're doing a lot. It's not science. What these wells drying up, you said you got the shallow water's going dry. Everybody knows that you got shallow water and then there's a clay layer and it goes down 400 feet. So you drill more wells. All the shallow water is going to go down because it's sucking all the shallow water out and it's making it go down to the deeper levels. Everybody knows that. You can listen to every single well out there and you know all the shallow water is draining. Because you have a deep well, it's going to drain all the shallow water. You guys aren't doing science. You guys are doing manipulation tactics. It isn't science what you're doing. I have not seen a comprehensive study of this water table at all. You guys don't have comprehensive studies. All you do is look at a well. You pay someone to go around and study it.
Mr. Klump, you reached your time limit.
Thank you, guys. But I don't really appreciate you being here. I really wish you weren't here.
Thank you, Mr. Klump. Next up is Trisha Garadet. She is online. After that will be William Wimmer. Trisha, are you able to unmute yourself online? Trisha, are you able to unmute yourself online?
Yes. Yay, success. Thank you. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. This is Tricia Gerardet, Gerrodette. I have watched the struggles in both the Willcox and the Douglas basins over their water issues, and follow what Douglas is now working on. And if an AMA is declared here in the Willcox Basin, I hope people who have expressed such concerns will continue to participate, because it's in the crafting of a management plan that all the ideas for how to take care of the issues, those levels of details are taken care of at that level. And so your concerns are quite valid and will be useful and helpful in crafting the plan. Just want to point out that under the state law, that there are criteria for declaring an AMA, as ADWR showed at the beginning of this meeting. And it seems clear to me that the Willcox Basin qualifies pretty clearly under criteria number 1 and number 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up online as well is William Wimmer, and after that will be our final online speaker, Nav Athwal.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
So I'm William Wimmer. I represent one investor on a small first generational farm. So thanks for listening to all of us. And I am glad not to be in your shoes right now. We all understand that there's a problem, and the department has presented its justification for executive action in bypassing the political process to establish the AMA. However, given the department's data, we reasonably conclude that the AMA is still going to allow for the water table to be depleted at its current rate until all the water is obliterated entirely. The residents of Willcox are then led to the conclusion that the AMA is going to benefit conspicuously unnamed special interests while punishing the residents of the Willcox Basin. I'd like to concur with Mr. Hodges' request for appropriate regulations to allow for small farmers to apply for rights to irrigate a reasonable area of land in the jurisdiction of the AMA. And please continue to invite and engage with the local stakeholders, the farmers, the ranchers, the vineyards, and others whose livelihood depends on the water. They can't just get a job. There's no city in Willcox. And for reasonable compromise on establishing a appropriate regulatory framework going forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Nav Athwal, also online, and then will be LaDonna Burgess in person.
Hello and thank you. My name is Nav Athwal, N-A-V-A-T-H-W-A-L. I farm with my mother, brother, and wife in Willcox. I want to first just say thank you to ADWR on the thorough presentation and all the data. I really appreciate the comments from the public. They've been really informative. I just have a few things I wanted to say. One is in 2015, there was a attempt to create an INA in the San Simon Basin. It was initiated by landowners and ultimately rejected by the director. The director noticed and agreed there was decline in groundwater, but stated that based on the data available, there's not enough data to clearly show that there's not enough water for the foreseeable future. A lot of the hydrologic conditions in that basin were very similar to Willcox, yet the director decided to reject a landowner-initiated proposal at the time, and now is proposing the same initiative for Willcox. I'm in full agreement that some form of water regulation is necessary. Whether you're a resident or a farmer, you cannot live or grow crops without water. Water is necessary for all living things. And when there's not enough of it, you have to approach it with caution and conservation at top of mind. A lot of landowners today and farmers have stated that a collaborative, local-based approach would be better. I'm in full agreement of that. We're currently relying on a law that's 44 years old that hasn't changed since it was initially enacted to create water policy 40 years later. Things have changed, economies have changed, and I believe that the law is just not enough anymore to account for all circumstances. As you've heard from landowners, some live in areas where there is no subsidence and where groundwater is not being depleted, and others live in areas where their houses have cracks on the bottom. I think a area by area approach that incentivizes conservation, recharge through public monies passed by the legislature is a much better way than having a AMA that treats everyone equally. For example, in Douglas, I believe, although that was a voter approved initiative and the goals were were appropriate, the ultimate management plan is not based on science. It's not based on data. It's based purely on what folks feel is right for certain crops and certain growers. And I just don't think that document provides a good future for Douglas. And I think we go down the path of a AMA in Willcox, I fear we're going to go down that same path, hamstring a lot of growers and a lot of the economy here. And we're going to prevent not only the economy from flourishing, but we're also going to use a archaic law to create legislation 40 years later. I thank you again for your time today and for allowing me to comment.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is LaDonna Burgess in person. After that will be Rich Ivano-Waski.
It's getting late. Those people that left didn't know there's a big door prize when they get done. My name's LaDonna Burgess, LaDonna Burgess. And I'm here as a retired person who chose to move here and raise my boys in an agriculture community where there's cowboys and tractors and John Deeres. I want to thank all of you farmers and ranchers for taking a beautiful sunshine day when I know you had a lot of work to do at home and come here because this is really an important meeting. For God's sakes, the election's over. We should all be getting along. I've seen more happier funerals than what I've seen around here today. I've never seen such long faces. But we are concerned. We know that water's a problem. People need to get the facts and we need to work together. I grew up on my grandpa's homestead and ranch in South Dakota, and water was a commodity. We had to wash our hair, wash our underwear, and then scrub the floor in the same bucket of water. So I know conservation. As SSVEC's energy management, and I was an irrigation specialist for 35 years, and as Phil Asbury, who worked, and we studied the loads and we worked with the irrigators, I've seen conservation improve 1000%. Most of the people here are too young to remember when there used to be pump action water running down the ditches everywhere in our valley. And I've seen technology. I mean, now the farmers have moisture gadgets in their field, and there's nobody with more wisdom and caring for our nature and our earth and our God-given country than farmers and ranchers. And it's nice to see you politicians come down here from Phoenix, because it sure would have put a lot of pollution into your Phoenix air if all these pickups and diesels would have went driving up to the Capitol. So thank you for being here. Knowing a little bit about water use and irrigation use. Keep in mind that residential areas where there's a small community of houses, they use more water than a farm. Water conservation needs to start at home with kids. And I started the International Science and Engineering Fair at Sulphur Springs many years ago. And our youth, they've got the answers. Reach out to them, do science projects, because we're seeing technologies improve unbelievable. My grandpa wouldn't believe the way that we do farming and agriculture. And it's a way of life that we in the valley like to live. And I want to thank everybody for coming because we need to work together now and make this a place that we can all survive and be happy and have beautiful sunny days like today. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Rich Ivanowaski. Ivanowski. After that will be Jill Alphin. No Ivan or Rich. Next will be Jill Alphin. After that will be Phil Foster.
My name is Jill Alphin, Jillallphin. I have lived here for 6 years. I was born and raised in Phoenix, so I know a lot about a little background in Arizona. And I also know there's a big difference between Phoenix and Cochise County. People that move here love it here. People that have been here all along love it here. And I think the thing that I like about today, it's the first time I've been to a big meeting of water conservation, but it is something that the minute I moved here was like, oh, I should know more about this because I have a well. And my neighbors have wells that are going dry and they struggle with that. And anyway, the things I noticed about here, well, first of all, I want to say thank you for all the information. It's been really good coming from you and coming from everybody out here. I really have learned a lot today and broadened my perspective a bit. But when I did come here, I was surprised by certain things that big projects that are going on. Somebody mentioned the orchards, and I love agriculture. I love the orchards, but you know, is this the best county for that many orchards when our water is sinking? I don't know. I don't know, and I don't claim to know about that, but the orchards is one. The giant dairy down there that, you know, on the outside kind of looks like, oh boy, that's a big going concern. And I bet we're all getting lots of tax money from it and benefits from it. And then the longer I live here, the more I realize that's probably not happening. But I know that they've got to be big water users. And then somebody also mentioned the lithium mine. It's like, I don't even think that company is American at all. And that's kind of an issue as well. And like people have said, you know, we can't help that we're in a drought. But I was very encouraged by everybody here that's been talking about, you know, sustainability and recharge and looking at better practices. Not to say that the practices of people that have been here all along don't have a really good they have such a background that we don't even know about, and they've seen the development and coming forward, and they've gotten on board because it's their cattle that are going to die and their families that are going to move and all of that.
I'm sorry, you've reached your 3-minute
Okay.
limit.
So I appreciate everybody's great input, and thank you so much. But
Thank you for your comment.
our rights away, so I don't agree with the AMA.
Thank you. Next up is Phil Foster, and after that will be David Roberts. Phil Foster. David Roberts.
Good afternoon. My name is David Roberts, Davidroberts. I'm fairly new to the area. I'm a third generation farmer in Central California, primarily a citrus grower. Water is an issue throughout the West. In our area, we're a little bit ahead of this action, and the government's answer is to dry up over 1 million acres of the most productive farmland in the world. At the same time, the United States is losing its food security There are wars being fought over oil. They'll pale in comparison to wars over food. It's very short-sighted. Government should be working on projects to bring water into these areas that have the other resources. Farming is not just one thing. Farming is land, farming is climate, and farming is water. Most areas aren't blessed like this area, climate and the land. So it needs the water. Same as California. The answer can't be, it's happening around the West, whether you are a cattle rancher or whether you're in irrigated agriculture. The answer is get the cattle out, get the farmers out, we'll get our food someplace. No one has that answer. Tell me where we can grow food without using natural resources. It doesn't exist. So there to be more thought. The problem with the AMA is it's taking private property rights. You have one guy who's farmed and you're going to let him go forward. Good. You have his neighbor who hasn't farmed, but maybe a successive generation wants to. You're going to lock them off that land without compensation. That's screwed up. The governments need to do and provide. When you grow a city, you build a church, you build roads, you build schools, you build shopping centers, but you don't build water infrastructure. You come and you strip it from the food source. That makes no sense. There's answers to the people whose wells are going dry, but stripping their food source, their food security isn't the answer. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next up is Cheryl Knott.
Cheryl Knott, CHERYLKNOTT. I moved to the Pierce area 22 years ago. And in 2015, as the chief hydrologist told us, there was a sweep. And when you looked at the well sweep data from 2015 compared to an earlier sweep, 2005, it was quite clear that the water was dropping dramatically already, particularly in the Dragoon, Sunsites, Pierce, and Sunazona areas, where we're now seeing all the pecan and pistachio trees going in, the land being cleared, and also in the Kansas settlement area. By law, the Department of Water Resources at that time could have designated the Willcox Basin as an AMA, but they declined to. And shortly thereafter, Riverview began drilling wells, clearing property, putting property under new irrigation. And I think we saw also in the hydrology presentation, the number of wells being drilled, non-exempt wells being drilled in 2015 skyrocketed. And then very next, really more wells, non-exempt wells in 2015 than before, way back to 1998. And then one more spike in 2022, huge spike. So 2015 was a turning point. There's really no doubt about it. And I really appreciate everybody today talking about let's work together, let's do continue to do our voluntary measures. But what we've done so far in terms of voluntary measures and group work, all of that has gotten us to where we are today. So 2015 was a turning point. ADWR didn't do anything. Our legislature didn't do anything. And we now are at another turning point. If this had been taken care of 10 years ago, we would not be at this hearing, but we might be at a very different kind of hearing. One where we would learn about the progress on groundwater conservation made in the last 10 years. And one where comments from the public and input from the Groundwater Users Advisory Council, required by law, would help shape the goals and plans for the next 10 years. Instead, we are all coping with the hard realities of living in one of the 3 most threatened basins in the state.
You've reached your 3-minute limit.
2025 can be a turning point. Now is the time to create the future that has a stable water supply. I totally support the AMA. Let's get on the path of conserving our water. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That is the last comment card we have received. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Let the record reflect that no one else wishes to speak. Is there anyone here who wishes to submit any written comments or evidence that they have brought with them? Let the record reflect that no one wishes to submit any written comments or evidence. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you all very much for participating in this process. Your comments will be considered by the director of the department. The director must issue written findings within 30 days after the public hearing. In making his determination, the director shall give full consideration to public comments and to recommendations made by local political subdivisions. Excuse me, folks, we're still conducting the hearing. Can you please quiet down? Thank you. Folks, we're still conducting the hearing. Could you please quiet down? Thank you all very much for participating in this process. Your comments will be considered by the director of the department. The director must issue findings within 30 days after the public hearing. In making his determination, the director shall give full consideration to public comment and to recommendations made by local political subdivisions. If the director finds that an AMA should be created, the director must issue an order designating the AMA. The director's findings and order must be published in a newspaper of general circulation in each county where the proposed AMA is located once a week for 2 consecutive weeks, as well as file a true copy map depicting the boundaries of the AMA within the Cochise and Graham County recorders. The director's order is effective when published for the second time. The findings and order are subject to requests for review or rehearing and actions for judicial review pursuant to ARS 45-114C. As I mentioned in the beginning of this hearing, the department will also accept written comments via fax or email prior to midnight today. Written comments prior to midnight today should be submitted to the department's docket supervisor, Sharon Scantleberry, by email to docketsupervisor@azwater.gov or fax at 602-771-8686. Information related to today's hearing will be posted on ADWR's website. This public hearing is now adjourned. Thank you all for attending and for providing comments.